discussion that also was launched by my colleague Bob Wilkinson. Oops, it has disappeared. And basically, if we look at the history of Emmy, it goes back to the 1980s with the start of the Erasmus program. Now, always talking about Europe specifically, goes back to the beginning of the Erasmus program. And that was a time, it marked a time where there was great enthusiasm. People really thought now we would launch something entirely new, but there were absolutely zero guidelines in place as to what that could be. Then with Bologna came the consolidation phase, which coincided with the establishment of international offices in higher education institutions. So Emmy and internationalization then became even more strongly linked, and it led to also giving Emmy and ICLHE a policy strategy, so it was included formally in university policies. But then also with this came the marketization of higher education. Students were beginning to be seen as basically consumers of higher education, and also education itself was beginning to be seen as something, as a real market, in fact, that would generate revenue. I'm just thinking of offshore campuses that were established, for example, by the United Kingdom. So the UK and the US, they have been more aggressive in pursuing that policy. And now we are at an age or a time of politicization. So that's when universities, higher education institutions started to think more critically of what actually the impact may be of English medium instruction. So what are we actually causing by integrating another language into our curricula? What does that actually mean? And it's specifically the unintended consequences that matter here. So what happened in the European Union? The European Union started to actually target English. There was a time of a backlash. In the consolidation phase, the European Union was a little more English friendly, as we might say, but from 2013 on, the tone in policy documents became much more critical. And we can see that here. In policy documents, it was explicitly stated that English presented a risk to other languages that needed to be looked at. English hegemony should be overcome. And interestingly, they also claimed that English actually was no language anymore. It was just a mode of communication, a simple tool, which is extremely dangerous to think of. And when we relegate a language into a place where it actually cannot be what it is. And fourth, then the final argument in EU policies was that English alone does not make you competitive. So you needed at least English, which was a skill anyway, only, plus a couple of other languages to thrive. It was embedded also in critical literature at the time. Now, linguistic imperialism goes back even to the 90s, but it was embedded in a new term that is now more widespread and more widely accepted, that is Englishization. Englishization, which has a negative, or tends to have a negative ring to it. So Englishization as something negative and controversial. So what does all of that mean in terms of English in an African context? What kind of challenges do you see? And I think some of these challenges have already been addressed in the keynote speech this morning and will probably be addressed again in other speeches and contributions at this conference. Now, first of all, Emmy as a phenomenon and ICLHE we can view as a child of globalization, as it were. So it is the result in some way of globalization. And in a European context, it is clearly also the result of what we call the knowledge economy. So with the Lisbon strategy in 2000, Europe wanted to create the biggest knowledge economy in the world. And with the knowledge economy came interconnections with other countries, with other cultures, and but they always framed from the perspective of employability, so making students employable, and always perceived also from the perspective of economy. So there were internationalization, or the idea of the knowledge economy informed internationalization drivers. That means through that perspective of the knowledge economy, internationalization was driven in order to get more students, more international students into universities. So internationalization was meant in terms of increase in mobility, now specifically also in Europe. It may probably also elsewhere, but in Europe it meant people had to move between countries and students had to move to other universities. So it was then also being connected with the idea that internationalization and EMI was a quality element. So if you had, the more EMI programs you had, the better quality education you would offer to students. So I will not critique this idea now at the moment, but that was kind of an idea that was also connected to it. Also, EMI was connected to strengthening research production capacity. That means as research got more interdisciplinary and problems got more complex, it was thought that research production capacity would be better if we had more English education programs. And finally, it would enhance the prestige and profile of the institution as such. So it became also just a reputation question. And it became a reputation question in that, or with the result that universities did not question it for quite some time, but simply tried to perpetuate it. Now for an African context, so this resulted also in ranking metrics. So it entered ranking metrics, and you saw then where universities were on that scale. I can tell you my university is low on that scale, but other Swiss universities are quite high on the international scale. For an African context, I imagine, and you will have to discuss that with me, it is different and a challenge in that sense, because this whole globalization process, it doesn't belong to Western industrialized nations, but they strongly pushed that trend. And with this also, they pushed their education models. It's not just about the language, but with the language also come textbooks, for example. I think here you are. With education models come textbooks, and in textbooks, knowledge is structured differently in a different language. So it's not just about the language, there's a whole host of other things. And there's also pedagogy that's involved, that I will be speaking about in a second. Also new, but maybe something you look for, is the idea of actually educate for a profession, meaning that you educate not for knowledge gain mainly, but you educate for employability. And also in that context, you change your focus then more to the student. Student centricity becomes a factor. And that creates pressures on local structures, on countries. So there is, first of all, here, say in Africa, you need to change the language to English in higher education. Then you have to think about changing your pedagogy. Then maybe you even have to change parts of your curriculum, or even create a new curriculum. That is a massive undertaking. Or even change part of your infrastructure, administrative infrastructure, you also need to think about. So this is a big undertaking. I wanted to say finding ways to navigate globalization is a challenge faced by every context and every nation. That is the same in Switzerland. it has a different phase in Algeria and a different phase in France or in Great Britain, but it is a complex process for everyone. So I'll briefly venture into English medium instruction in Switzerland, if you are interested in that. I have here a timeline and percentages on the right-hand side. And you see, we started out very humbly in 2002 with 2.5% of all the study programs, that is degree programs, bachelor's and master's programs, that were taught through English. So so-called ETPs. Now I'm only talking about fully taught programs through English, not English medium instruction partially integrated. That is also an option, of course. But these are fully taught programs. Then in 2008, we had 3.7%. You see a rise. 2014, 14%. And then 2017, that's where I stopped counting because there has been no count since then. We have had about 380 English taught programs, and Switzerland was the one with the highest number of English taught bachelor's programs in Europe, next to the Netherlands. I'll speak about the Netherlands in a second. So Switzerland is, in that sense, highly experienced with ICLHE. However, I've not talked about the quality of the delivery of those programs. That's a different issue. So let's have a closer look at what Switzerland did with English medium of instruction in the university. I've looked at 7 higher education institutions in greater detail with respect to their individual policies that they developed. First of all, maybe let me say that Switzerland is characterized by so-called linguistic harmony. So those of you who are not familiar with Switzerland, we have 4 national languages, 3 of them big European languages, German, Italian, and French. And we have distinct language regions where these languages are spoken. Now, linguistic harmony is a doctrine in Switzerland, which means that we delegate basically responsibility for language use to the regions. So they have their own freedom to choose which languages they want to implement. There was a politician in Switzerland who said once, "Les Suisses ne s'entendent pas." Non, les Suisses s'entendent parce qu'ils ne se comprennent pas. So that's what is linguistic harmony in Switzerland. So we just don't talk to each other. So interestingly, in Switzerland, despite the high number of English taught programs, there is little controversy and discussion. There's not much debate, political debate at the moment. But compare with the Netherlands in a second. So let us look at the language regions briefly. So that's the map of Switzerland, and you see the red, orange is the German-speaking part, which is the biggest part. And so when you look at 2 of those universities in the greater Zurich area, Zurich is the more economy-driven region, so there's a lot of international companies in the Zurich area. So they have implemented a very pragmatic way of dealing with it, with the language. So they have a pragmatic argumentation. They want administrative bilingualism, meaning English and German both are equally represented. They do not have any cap as to the number of programs in English that one should have, so there's no cap. And there is an active endorsement also of English as a medium of instruction. It is also an explicit part of internationalization policy of these institutions. But let's move to an area that you may be more familiar with, that is the French-speaking area, Geneva and Fribourg, and they're totally different. They have a principled approach, a value-based approach. They say, okay, we can have English medium instruction, but at the same time we need to promote language multilingualism. So they also promote actively German-taught courses. And also they say, you cannot just have English-taught programs, but you must also have French consecutive master's programs. So it is not possible just to have English alone. And then we have the federal in universities, we have 2 federal universities that are quite well known. These have been ranked highest as most international universities in the world several times. And they have what they call a principled pragmatic way. So they're somewhere in between. They say, actually they give each language equal rights, English and the local language is be it German or French. English is the sole language of the master's programs. So there are no master's programs in German, to my knowledge. And German or French is the sole language of the bachelor's program. So they divided it that way. So in fact, we can say or conclude from the brief excursion to Switzerland, the regions decide for themselves. They adopt either a pragmatic solution or a principled rationale as a matrix. They institutionalize English at the master's level, even where the principled rationale is a matrix. And the pragmatic rationale, like I said, is strongly connected to internationalization as a driver of quality and innovation. There is, let me finish that brief excursion to Switzerland by saying that there is a weak overarching commitment to bilingual education in higher education institutions. So there is only a weak commitment, with the exception of the West, that is the French-speaking area. Overall, we can say Switzerland tends to have a pragmatic approach. And I'm jumping to the contrast now. That's quite interesting. In the Netherlands is a country that is of similar size, at least in terms of territory, as Switzerland. It is even similar in language, we might say. We might even understand them when they speak. But there has been a proposal by a center-right party to cap the numbers of English-taught programs and to make 1/3 of all programs mandatory in the Dutch language. One of the reasons is that English-taught programs have increased since Brexit. So since Great Britain left the European Union, there has been an explosion of English-taught programs in the Netherlands, and that has caused a lot of distress and controversy in the country. So not all small countries react the same way. And that's my conclusion. In that regard, your country will find a solution that will fit. And it's not the same as it might be in Libya, and it's not the same as it might be in our case, even if maybe the cultural background is similar. I'll conclude very soon. I just wanted to say, and now briefly move away from the policy dimension and say that in successful higher education programs, we always must consider the role of the teachers. They are our key, basically, to all of this. They're pivotal, as it says here. They're the most important variable, and they're indispensable. They are the primary architects. They actually work on the ground, and they must make it happen. So, and we ask ourselves here, how do we get the teachers from this scenario? And now that's a scenario that I see quite often. The ME teacher is confident of their English language ability and ensures all their slides are in accurate English and teaches the course the same way as in the local language. So that's a very common scenario. That's almost the default scenario. And how do we get now teachers to adopt the second scenario? The ME teacher recognizes that the change in the language of instruction involves more than just translating the slides and prepares to teach their course in English differently. So there must be a paradigmatic difference. And I think that's an important challenge. And believe me, this sounds extremely trivial, but this distinction I always meet. And that's, we always go from the first and we try to move to the second. And no matter where I go. That's my second last slide. I just wanted to show you this quickly because it means preparing differently means we need to change our pedagogical approach. And Our pedagogical approach has to become more student-centered. When you change a language, you need to start individualize and personalize more. And that means the didactics, the pedagogy changes. Student-centered learning I name here as a key approach that might be useful. And this student-centered learning has been an European higher education area priority for quite some time. It relates to constructivist theories of learning, and it means that we promote learning in communication with teachers and other learners. What I like also about student-centeredness is that we take students seriously. So we take them seriously as partners in the teaching and learning enterprise. So it means we have to engage, and that's another big challenge. We have to engage 5 minutes, I'll be through soon. We have to engage with students interactively, so we have to change our mode of interaction a little bit for any ICLAG to be successful. And that's an area that we work with university lecturers quite a lot. So how, even if I cannot speak fluently, or not as fluently as I would like to, how can I still engage others in constructive interaction without losing face? Because then also it becomes a face issue. And then also we have to, apart from interactivity, we can also rely a little bit on technology, on learning management systems, and involve other means, so to actually deflect focus away from ourselves and get a little bit more air to breathe. And actually that's always a good thing, because we always think that if we present, we must present, but in fact you could say half the things and students would still learn the same. That's my assumption. I mean, you please correct me. So, I'll jump here. That's now my final slide. Not only do we have to change our pedagogical approach, but also we have to change learning outcomes. And here is where assessment comes in. I think you have quite some experience in relation to assessment. Assessment means assessment and English medium instruction, or ICLAG, means that we have to not just see students as economic beings, so they're not just economic beings that are employable at the end. That's just one dimension of it, but we also have to view them as social and human beings. So we build capacity not just in relation to them being able to perform in an economy, but also to build them as human beings. And I think that's a very important aspect that I want to stress here. So this includes citizenship perspectives, for example. What kind of citizens are they going to be? And that is a part of which falls also into ICLAG programs. I summarize and conclude. ICLAG, which usually is through English, involves varying commitments to language learning, from no commitment to quite a lot of commitment, whereas we're usually in the middle somewhere. It impacts the curriculum, it impacts pedagogy and graduate attributes, so that there's no way around that. It currently undergoes critical reflection, so we're not just perpetuating it anymore, but we want to do it right this time. It's embedded in a Western economic discourse, that's just a reality, but it will break up and it will become broader. It can take a myriad of policy solutions. You will find your solution that is appropriate to you, and it impacts also teachers and teaching qualifications. So quite a massive undertaking. And with this, I'd like to close. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Patrick. Would you like to have a seat here? Thank you for respecting so tightly time. You still have 2 minutes if you want to add something.
No.
Thank you. Thank you for your interesting presentation, showing out deep insights about indeed the overlapping parameters between ICLHP and EMI, and this was thorough through across Europe. And thank you for the slides that you dedicated for the African context. And my colleagues here, thank you, Dr. Julien, for having joined us so quickly. I didn't expect that. So Professor Mediani, Professor Hamada Hassan, and Dr. Leila Julien are going, I would like to ignite a discussion about the presentation of Professor Patrick as a starting point, because there are some points in advance that we need to know about. So first, to situate where we are standing currently and what is ahead with us as challengers and what concerns. I'd like you also to highlight the point that the African context sometimes is too large, and the Algerian context should be narrowed down to the Algerian context. So, floor is yours. I don't know how you want to proceed, presenting or discussing it all together. We start with the...
to each one, their own reaction.
Okay, so Professor Mediani,
yeah, so we did get the text, and I've gone through it. So I'm going then to talk about the parameters you mentioned, and I'm going to change context from yours to mine. It starts with English hegemony. And in my country, it's rather paradoxical, because when I've read Philipson's book, Linguistic Imperialism, and in my country, we're doing everything to just get rid of all languages around and speak about English. I've spoken with colleagues at the ministerial level about transnational education. It's when we started talking about quality assurance that we forgot. Then you have the quality control. Let me tell you, we have a repository which has been then worked on for years, but nobody knows about it. So nobody is implementing it. Employability, well, the everlasting headache. I'm not sure we're going then to reach it one day, at least not in the near future. Then you have marketization of higher education, which is also a problem we need then to look at. Let me tell you, it's very unlikely to happen in Algeria. Well, we know the small portion which is left then to the open market, as it were. But you did ask a question. I'm going then to respond to that before going to your own questions. And you said, English alone doesn't make you competitive. Well, I hope those who are up there will listen to you, because that is exactly what they don't want to hear. Okay? English is going to open all the doors of the future, and maybe after the future, if there's an after. Now, let me go then to the questions, because our colleague then has given us our homework, and I'm still a good student at my age. The first question is about the structures of thought. And you said that they are very slow in changing. Let me tell you, this is the very country where nothing changes. Because, well, the mindsets are fixed, okay? And the more you climb up the mountain to go up there, and the less you have opportunity then to change things. The next question is about the readiness of the Algerian higher education institutions and whether they will integrate ICLHE. I doubt it. I doubt it. And I doubt it, just in case you have not heard the first one. No, it's because we went through a decisive reform. Let me tell you, we started, I say we because I was part of the project at the ministerial level in 2002. Okay, we started then thinking about the whole project for 2 years. And then we were rushed then to give the first curricula then for all specialities and languages. I was then heading the thing. From 2004 onwards, all universities were supposed then to embark on this methodology and the LMD and the scheme and what have you. Let me tell you, and each time I went to a different place in Algeria, each time they were telling me, but what did you do in your English department in ORAN? I said, I'm not supposed then to change the world myself. It's always a question of a team. And I said, nobody is ready in ORAN then to change then this aspect. The ORAN degree in English was pushed to go into the reform in 2011, 7 years after the start of the reform. Can you imagine that? Mm. So you see why I would say, well, it's not a question of readiness, but maybe the structure of thought. And Professor Madhu then has said something along this line. So we need then to just refer to it. The last question is about long-term perspectives of ICLHE. I'm not hopeful. I'm going then to tell you of an anecdote which was given to me, and it just happens that Laihamu is with the angels today. So we had a rector in 1980, and we met years after, and he was just explaining that he went to Switzerland, and he was invited by the president of a university, and the president said, well, look, we have a meeting. It was 1980, I insist. And he said, we are going then to plan how we're going to change by 2030. 50 years difference. And then the president, well, said to our rector, well, he used to be a rector, and he said, do you do the same thing in Algeria? He said, I don't know what tomorrow has for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor. So now let's move to Professor Hamada Hassan from Ernest Constantine to share with us.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Patrick, for sharing your experience with us and giving us an idea about how the process generally in Europe and more specifically in Switzerland, and how its impact, its main impact, its application in elsewhere in European countries. African countries. With, as my colleague Professor Mohammed Miliani mentioned, the different context raises concern about a number of other variables than the ones that were raised in Europe. So if you consider one of the principles you mentioned in the EMI or ICLHE is that it is applicable in a country where the language basically is not English. What about in the case when not only not English, but multiple languages? So we consider that if in French, people study science and technology in French. If you add English, it's one language addition, it's one language. If you take our case, we have Berber, Arabic, French, and four. So in this multilingual community, it raises a real problem. And one of the concerns of my colleagues who teach science and technology in Arabic, they say, we have even major difficulties in explaining the scientific information in the mother tongue, let alone to talk about English. So this is again one of the challenges. I mean, you provide us with the opportunities, yes, that opens gates for mobility, employment, visibility, metrics, and so on. But for some, it becomes an obstacle. One of the ideas you mentioned that the students who are considered as adults, let's say in an autonomous learning process, they are responsible of their success. What about their failure? Who would be responsible? Is it the institution who obliged them to study in another language in which they are not proficient enough? So what can we do with these particular things? We have, as my colleague Mohammed said, a central government decision. Did these universities in Europe decide by their own boards to apply EMI or CBI or ICLHE, or is it a top-down decision? Because that makes a whole difference. If it's the initiative of the only institution, then people feel much more concerned, much more involved, and would make best efforts to make the whole process successful. When it is a top-down process, you're not always, let's say, rewarded for what we are doing. The politicians just decide and we have to apply, but who would benefit from such a decision? My remark about this issue, is it a technology-bound teaching and learning benefit, or is it a technology business benefit? Because the more we add technology, more technology companies get benefits, and countries, African countries who do not have enough funding for such a process would lose that much. I think these are the ideas that were my concern about the issue. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you very much. Here, I think it's important to highlight the different areas in Switzerland, especially the areas which are French-speaking areas, which resisted the EMI programs first. Now I give the floor to Dr. Dreema Leila from ENS Constantine.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry I've been missed the very first part of your presentation. I was actually presenting in one of the workshops, but I could join, and Fatiha, thank you for allowing me to know what it was
You're
about
welcome.
at the beginning. So you talked about 3 phases: incubation, consolidation, and politicization. And I'm afraid politicization is the heart of everything. So I would say in African contexts, you need to politicize before you go into incubation and consolidation. So at our levels, we could succeed in incubation, but we are stuck at the level of consolidation and politicization. So no action could be undertaken unless the politicians could give their consent. Another point I would like to raise is the idea that ICLHE, and this is my own assumption, is becoming a threat to languages, and especially in the academic domains. So talking about English as being the language of international communication and knowledge of science, language of science, and so on, would countries and policymakers take of it as a threat to their local languages and to the prosperity of those languages if we say that English is the medium of instruction? So can't we do it in our native languages? Couldn't we do it in our national languages? So are we now allowing the floor to English as to become the new leader, language leading knowledge and science? And then again, another point is about the social contexts where ICLHE is undertaken. If I take the Algerian context and being one of the products of the program, I would say that, well, I have been following the talks this morning with very great interest, and I could say that the disillusion that Fatiha talked about could be just momentary, because there is still hope. If people who believe in the idea, people who have really grasped the intentions behind this whole program, then we could make change. The only this event in itself is a very good start to the dissemination of the or to information, informing people about the existence of ICLHE I am really happy to see that among the audience, people have never heard about it before. Now, there are ways we can do it, and you mentioned it in your presentation. So we should start by making changes at the level of the curricula, the materials, and whatsoever. And among the points I'd like to highlight today is that we are defending an ambitious idea on working on integrated content and language textbooks, helping teachers, because there is a will from the part of the government, and then there is a messy implementation, may I call it. So why not taking initiatives? So we, the products of this program, and starting action through at least providing help to teachers who find it difficult to implement ICLHE in their contexts. So I am actually defending the project in 2 days' time, so to allow for the publication of ICLHE textbooks meant for disciplinary subjects, where teachers could work in collaboration with language teachers and produce their own materials that are going to be used by other colleagues later on. So it's a kind of domino effect that we are expecting, and I'm sure we'll reach it if ever we just keep believing that it might be possible. Thank you.
Yeah, please, Patrick. There's a point of interest that I wanted to
Hassan, please be
30
brief.
seconds.
To allow
So brief. You mentioned that there is a rapid growth of 239% in the English teaching programs between 2007 and 2014. Regarding other situations where there is very slow growth. What's the secret of this huge growth? There was no resistance to change, or when we want to change something in a community, there's always people who resist that change. What's particular about this growth of 239% in about, let's say, 7 years? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your interest and remarks about Professor Patrick's presentation. The audience, we can allow 1 or 2 interventions, remarks. So students there, student there, and our colleague from Benghazi University there. We'll add 1 and we'll wrap up. Otherwise you'll be fasting today. You'll be fasting today. Intermittent fasting. Intermittent at least.
Hi, I'm Dr. Manad, and I work at Algerian University. I have a question regarding the Englishisation of the process of language, as you said earlier. Now, to me, I do understand and recognize that it's a double-edged phenomenon of integrated English in the system. So, on the one hand, we do see that we were accepting this commodity to become global. But on the other hand, on the implicit side, we're also creating classes within the system. So, of course, we're talking about marketization of language, but again, accepting something as a commodity or creating classes within the system. Now, I do not recognize, because of course, sorry? Yeah. Now, of course, because we're shifting, when we're moving into this structure, we're shifting from just recognizing or accepting or acknowledging language just as foreign language. You're now taking it as the second or third language. So how far do you expect that the cons may be superseding the pros, or is it vice versa? This is a question that lays in my mind the whole time. I'm really glad that you touched upon this topic, and I was looking into it, so thank you so much, and I've been really looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the sorry to the teacher. We try to come back. We are very limited in time. That's why we're sorry.
Thank you, Patrick, for the nice presentation. Practically, it's a matter of fact that in the big contract of the international language development, in Europe, I spent almost 2 weeks in Zurich countries. The attitude of people towards English was negative, what I see. So the English that I use in my country, I think is much better than when I used it in Europe. Most of European people that they prefer using their language in German. Sometimes I use Italian, they understand me, but when I speak English, I get close to at least this is recent. So when we talk about Switzerland, as I said, that there are 4 provisions that each one speaks different language: German, French, Italian. I think you've got your local language in Switzerland. So which one policy have you taken to convince or enforce the students to study masters in English? This is the question that I'm asking.
Thank you so much. The last.
Yeah, which have you taken any policy? Have you given motivations to students to study in English? The attitude of English seems as negative. That's what I see.
So the last one, Dr. Taleb. Would you please give the mic to Dr. Taleb, please? Last one.
ودي الأمينة ودي الأمينة la parole.
Amina
Hamdoun.
Je ne connais pas.
C'est un cohort one معنا. Sinon il est
Elle m'a envoyé.
It has taken a long time to implement English. I think it was from 1987 until 2013. So that is, it gives us hope. We are just beginning, so we still have a long way ahead. Then you have said that English alone doesn't make you competitive. That means that we don't need only English on one side. On the other side, we can see other countries like China, for example, which is very developed economically. And I think maybe I'm mistaken. I think they keep the language. English is not necessarily the most used or the first language in China. Maybe I'm mistaken. Okay? So how come they succeed to be so competitive without imposing the English language? So is it important or essential to impose the language? This is my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Van. So one more and we stop. Our colleague. Please be brief.
Thank you very much. I will be brief. Thank you very much for this opportunity. So thank you, Dr. Patrick, for your presentation. So I think just, is it a solution that we need to avoid the overgeneralization of applying ICLHE in all our universities? Do you think that is just one of the key recommendations out of which we need to have here from this conference? It means, do we need to stop thinking that ICLHE is the best solution for all our universities throughout Algeria? Can we just stick to needs analysis and see who the population is? It means what are the who are the students who need to use EMI rather than overgeneralizing the approach to all our universities. Can this be a solution to the problem we are facing today? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So, Professor Schroeder, can you answer all of them all together in one fact, no more than 5 minutes?
In one sentence.
Okay, in one sentence, yes.
Magic.
The microphone.
Yes, we need the mic, please. Thank you so much. Here you are.
Thank you. Well, I'll begin with the last one because that's now, I've written it down, the last, so it's in my brain. So do we need to avoid the implementation of EMI programs or ICLHE? I think that's what your question was. Is that the solution? And I would say yes and no. it very much depends on your specific context. My plea is you really need to respect your local context. That determines the route you can take, period. Because in Switzerland, like I said, there has been no, no controversy. It just has silently grown organically, and there's very, very little controversy. And in the Netherlands, there's a massive outcry. So why would that be? But we need to respect both ways. And in terms of competitiveness, I think Algeria will find its way. It will find its niche. I was very much struck by the comment about multilingualism, actually, that already exists in higher education in Algeria. How fascinating. And now you can add another language to it. So we've never talked about that. It doesn't have to be English only at all. It can be English plus or other languages plus English. So we have not talked about translanguaging as a possibility. So we need to take a soft approach to this, it seems to me, in an Algerian context. And it also depends a little bit on how you sell basically the value of your local idioms to imagine to students that come into Algeria, now a prospective scenario in the future. But that's your job basically to sell the value of the heritage languages that you have here. And they are valuable. And I think we can expect students also to learn some of those languages. So that's another point. And then it also is a question of discipline. So start with disciplines that lend themselves more easily to international contexts, and you know them already. So I don't go into that in greater detail. We're all hungry. Huh? Do the pros outweigh the cons? I have here. Same answer here. I can't be the judge of that. It's, how shall I say, at the end of the day, as English is a big lingua franca, it does open doors, and I think it is valuable to at least open them in some areas. I would not give up on that so easily, not either or. Yeah, that's. I think your questions we have to take over lunch, because it leads into a different direction. I've noted it has to do with motivating students and across the language regions in Switzerland. I had trouble hearing you acoustically for some reason. Do you think we could take that over lunch?
Yeah.
Then I would then maybe close. I would have responses also to my colleagues here, but I think hunger prevails.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
One long sentence. Really interesting listening to you. Thank you for the concern and the attention you are paying to this local work field. We hope seeing you so frequently among us, and I hope that you, as all the foreign participants, enjoy your stay among us again. You are welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the audience, and I feel really sorry. I feel really sorry for not being able to give support to everybody. It's interesting, but the workshops are still going on, and we wish you pleasurable stay among us. Thank you. Now you are invited to join the restaurant. Where are they going to eat? Où est-ce qu'ils vont manger, Asma? Bibliothèque. So the same place. You will join the same place for the coffee break in order to take your meal. And بصحتكم, as we say, بصحتكم.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Yes, likewise. That's a start. Okay.